Your Dog's Friend is a nonprofit 501c3 whose mission is to help keep dogs out of shelters by educating and supporting their humans. We promote positive method of training and behavior modification through stress-free methods. As part of that mission, we offer free webinars like the one you're about to watch. Subjects range from dog behavior, stress-free training, and other tools to help you understand your relationship with your dog. If you like the webinar, be sure to give us a thumbs up. Click the notification bell and subscribe to our channel. By subscribing, you'll be notified when future videos are posted. Now enjoy the webinar.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to your Dog's Friend webinar series. Today's webinar is about how to protect your dog and yourself when a loose dog approaches. I went to this webinar years ago, so many years that the speaker didn't remember that she had done it. I loved it and contacted Robin and said, please do it again. So I know that this webinar will help a lot of us. Let me tell you more about our speaker, Robin Bennett. Robin is a certified professional dog trainer, author, speaker, and an all-around expert on dogs. She founded one of the largest dog training companies in Virginia and has been using her experience in reading dogs to teach families how to train their pets, as well as helping others in the pet care industry keep dogs safe for over 20 years. Robin is co-founder of the Dog Gurus, which teaches and supports dog daycare and boarding facilities, and Ruffly Speaking, a new program to help educate dog parents. She is co-author of Off-Leash Dog Play, a complete guide to safety and fun, and author of All About Dog Daycare, a reference book on opening a dog daycare. Please put your questions in chat. We will get to as many as possible. I also want to remind you about donations. Our free programs, including these webinars, depend on donations, and I therefore hope that you will consider donating during or after the webinar. There's an icon on the home page in the upper right-hand corner that you can click on if you are inclined to donate, and I hope you will be. As I said, I know we will all learn a lot today, and Robin, it's all yours.
Great. Well, thanks for having me back again. For those that don't know, I used to live in Virginia, so I would come up to Maryland and do these presentations. And about 5 years ago, I moved to Colorado, and Deborah was like, well, we can still do them. And thanks to technology, we have done them, continue to do these webinars. So it was great when she asked me to do this. I was like, I don't think I've ever done a webinar like that. And she goes, yeah, you did a couple of years ago. So I'm happy to be presenting this again. And I appreciate all of those of you that have jumped on a Saturday to spend some time talking about how to handle loose dogs and stay safe when you're out and about with your dog. So just to make sure that we're all on the same sheet of music, this is going to help you if you've got a dog or you know somebody who does. That's probably all of you that are on this webinar right now. And it's also going to help you if you've ever wondered what to do when you encounter a loose dog, whether you're just out for a walk by yourself or many times out for a walk with your own dog and you encounter loose dogs. And I have found that certain neighborhoods, this is more likely to happen than others. Like in my neighborhood in Virginia, it very rarely happened. In my neighborhood here in Colorado, it's a little bit more likely to happen. So if you've ever wondered what to do, we're going to talk about that. Or maybe you want to know what to do if there are dogs that are in a fight, hopefully not your dog, but maybe it does end up being your dog. And we're going to talk about that as well. And because I do believe in positive reinforcement for training dogs, it also works with humans. If you stick around, I am going to also send to Deborah to send to everybody who's on the webinar a checklist on how to handle loose dogs in dog fights. So you can get that when you hang around to the end. So we appreciate that. What we're going to talk about.
Stop you for 1 second.
Okay.
Make sure, Beth, you need to turn off your video And everyone else, make sure that your videos aren't on, because we can see you, we can see everything you're doing, and I don't know that you really want us to see everything you're doing. Okay, so thank you. Beth, can you hear me? Okay, turn off your video, since I can't figure out how to. Not you, Robin, you disappeared.
Wait.
Where'd you go?
On. I'll turn mine back on. No, I think John was muting and doing that for everybody. All right.
There you go. Would you know how I can turn off somebody who shows up?
I actually don't, but I didn't just turn my video off. So I think John may have figured that out. All right. So what you're going to learn on our presentation today is a couple of things. Number one, 2 immediate actions you can take when you see a loose dog. We're going to talk about that. We're also going to talk about 5 simple ways to deter an approaching dog. So hopefully before the dog even gets to you or approaches too closely or closer than your comfort, we're going to talk about some simple ways. And these are all ways that you might not do all of them. I would pick and choose what seems to work best for you, but I'm going to give you 5 different ways that you can deter an approaching dog. We're going to talk about the safest ways to break up a fight. And it's not going to have to do with grabbing the dogs, because that's usually what most people are inclined to do. But I'm going to give you some recommendations for some other things that might keep you a little bit safer. And then most important for me is talking about the canine body language that will actually keep you safe. And I'm a big advocate for those that have ever done anything with seminars that I've given or presentations that I've given or books that I've written. I talk a lot about canine body language. And if you can learn a little bit about canine body language, that's probably the number one way to keep yourself safe and also to be a good advocate for your own dog or for any dog that you meet. So we're going to talk about a little bit of that as well. So the reason that I initially got involved with wanting to talk to people about this is that I had a lab, my previous lab, his name was Denver. And I went for a walk one day with 3 of my friends, some close friends of mine that were not in the dog industry. They were neighborhood friends that, you know, we just hung out together. Our kids went to soccer together and we all just went for a walk. They didn't have dogs. I was the only one that had a dog. But we went on a walk together. And at one point in the walk, I saw some kind of bully breed. I don't know. It was a pit bull or Staffordshire approaching us. He was off leash and he was running pretty fast, pretty good clip towards us. And my friends were freaking out. Like, I'm not kidding you. They were starting to scream. They were starting to get really upset. They were grabbing my arm. They were like, oh my God, someone's coming. A dog's coming. A dog's coming. And I was pretty relaxed. I was like, this is not a big deal. But they were literally freaking out because this dog was approaching and because I had my dog. And you could tell that he was making a beeline towards my dog at the time, but they were all freaking out. The good thing is my story had a happy ending. What happened was when that dog came, I was looking at the dog as it was approaching us. The dog had relaxed, loose body language. The dog was not barking. He was not growling. He was not showing his teeth. He was not doing anything that indicated to me that my dog was in any risk or that any of us were at any risk. My dog also happens to be good. That dog was pretty good with other dogs. So I knew he wouldn't react. He wouldn't, start barking or anything. And sure enough, the dog got up to us. He sniffed my dog. They did a couple play bows and then that dog just went on his way. So it had a happy ending, but it was then that I realized my friends who were freaking out had no idea. They really thought this dog was going to attack us and probably hurt my dog. And they started asking me, like, how did you stay so calm? They were like, telling me I was a hero for staying so calm. And the reality is I was not being a hero. It was just that I recognized the dog's body language enough to say, this dog is not a danger. Like, worst case scenario, he's going to come up and want to play. And that might, be a problem because my dog's on leash. But I wasn't nervous that he was going to do anything to harm us. And so, but it wasn't that I was just calm in the face of this massive terror, which is what they thought I was being. I was just saying to them, no, the dog never did anything to indicate that he was going to hurt us. He was literally a friendly dog, off leash, should not have been off leash, but he was of no threat to us. And at that point, I started realizing that people need to learn this canine body language, because if they had understood and seen things in the way that I saw them, they would have been pretty calm too. And so I became kind of obsessed with helping others start to understand a little bit about this canine body language. And as Deborah mentioned, I am a certified professional dog trainer. I've been working in the pet industry. I own my own pet care facility in Virginia when I lived there. So for 18 years, I had a dog training facility in Virginia. When I moved, I also sold that business, obviously, because I moved out to Colorado. But I also started working with a partner of mine named Susan Briggs, and we co-founded the Dog Gurus. The Dog Gurus actually teaches pet care facilities how to grow their business and how to train their staff. So basically, all the stuff that we teach those pet care facilities owners are what I want to bring to the pet parents as well. And that was, I'll talk about Ruffly Speaking at the end, but that's also why we started Ruffly Speaking, because this is stuff that pet parents should really understand, and you'll have such a better relationship with your dog, and you'll be able to be a better advocate, and you'll just have a better time when you're out with your dog, because you'll know when to really be worried versus when maybe you don't have to be quite as worried. So what we're going to talk about are knowing what to do before you need to do it. And that's the thing, is you want to be proactive when you're taking your dog out for a walk, not just necessarily reactive. And there's some things that you can learn ahead of time to keep your dog safe and to keep you safe as well. And we want to talk about some of that. So number one, the ways to minimize fights. There are two basic things that I would say to minimize fights. And Deborah, I know I'm not keeping track of the chat. So if there's anything I need to say or jump in, just jump in and stop me, because I will answer questions at the end. I just noticed there's a lot of chats in there right now already. So if you have questions, definitely leave them in the chat box though. So tip one, ways to minimize fights. The two things that I would recommend, number one, teach your dog to be polite on leash. So, and the second is socialize your dog to be calm around other dogs. Now, I will tell you that in today's world of dog parks and dog daycares and people that want to let their dog play with other dogs, none of which I really have a problem with, but there's a lot of dogs out there that actually learn that they should pull and lunge and bark and act like a lunatic when they see another dog, because society has gotten into this point where we want our dogs to play with other dogs. I don't have a problem with dog parks, our dog daycares. Actually, I work with dog daycares all the time. And there's some great benefits for that. But what I do think is an issue is when your dog's on leash, they should not be getting constantly rewarded for pulling and lunging by being able to play with other dogs. When your dog's on leash, I don't think they should be playing with other dogs. I don't necessarily even know that you need to let them meet every dog they see when you're on leash with them. So if you want to take them to a place where you can let them off leash to play, that's a whole separate issue, and whether or not that's the right thing even for your dog. And there's a whole right way to do that and a wrong way to do that. But talking about just taking your dog on a walk, when your dog sees other dogs on leash, my recommendation is train your dog to look at you, to sit with you, to watch you, and to ignore the other dog, unless there becomes a situation where you are going to take the dogs off leash and let them play. You know, you go into the park and you take them off leash or whatever. When I'm on hikes with my dog, I don't let my dog meet every dog they meet. In fact, I usually step off the trail so that my dog has an easier time focusing on me and letting those other dogs pass. It is the case that sometimes those other dogs will walk over to my dog. And then I usually just say, you know, we don't want to play right now. Let your dog go. But I think we have gotten so used to seeing another dog with our dog on leash and then letting the dogs go up to each other and meet, that sometimes that actually builds an overexcitement, over arousal in those dogs. And they aren't being polite on leash, or they're pulling so hard, or they're barking or whatever. So I would really focus on teaching your dog to be polite on leash in the presence of other dogs. Can you walk past the dogs with your dog not, you know, pulling or lunging or acting like a lunatic? So that's the number one thing. And sometimes distance makes a difference. So even if that means you have to cross to the other side of the street, that's okay. I would start there. But you're just teaching your dog to be polite on leash, regardless of what other dogs it might see. That's number one of the first ways that you can minimize dog fights, is just by getting that calmness in your dog. The second is to socialize your dogs to be calm around other dogs. And this is particularly for dogs. There's a lot of reactive dogs, and I realize that that can be an issue. So you want to help those dogs to be calm around other dogs. And again, usually that involves not letting them off leash to play with those dogs or go approach them or whatever, or taking a reactive dog classes. There's a lot of those available now where you can help your dog to learn to be calm around other dogs. And that doesn't mean playing with them. What I'm talking about is they can just be in the presence. They can walk by a dog park. They can walk by a room or an area where there's other dogs. They can walk into PetSmart or any kind of big box store where there's other dogs. They don't have to play with them, but they should be enough. They should be socialized well enough that they aren't overly fearful or overly aggressive trying to defend themselves. So all of those things really have to do with training. We're not going to cover those. I'm just bringing that up because those are two of the biggest ways to keep your dog safe right off the bat. And you'll see this slide again in a minute or in a few minutes, because we're going to talk about this a little bit more in another aspect of dog safety and handling loose dogs. So that's the first thing, is if your dog is really crazy on leash when it sees other dogs, then look at behaviorally what you can do to help your dog with that. And then as a minimum, I would teach your dog to look at you when he sees other dogs. And if you do nothing else but get your dog to the point where when he or she sees another dog, they look at you. You can reward them obviously for that, or you can play with a toy, or you can ask them for a behavior like sit. That's going to give you a lot more control. And because now they're not staring at the other dog, it's also going to give you a little bit more control in terms of how that other dog responds to your dog. The other alternative is you can also just throw treats on the floor. And you'll see this in a second as well, but just to get your dog to not be staring at that other dog. So there's a lot that you can do when you're walking your dog in whatever neighborhood or whatever area that you're walking your dog in. And depending on how many dogs might be around, these things you might be doing a lot of, or you might be doing hardly at all. And an example of that is when I take my dog walking around my neighborhood, which I did this morning. I live in a suburb, but we have a whole big open area that's like prairie. And so when I'm walking him out there, there's very few dogs around. So I don't have to practice with him a lot, or I don't get the opportunity to practice with him a lot, I should say. But when I go on a hike in Colorado, certain trails are super busy, especially in the fall and the spring. I'm doing it all the time. And it's not something I just leave to chance. If there's somebody coming down the trail and I'm going up the trail, I'm getting my dog to look at me. I'm getting my dog to sit. I'm rewarding my dog for that behavior. And like I said, I usually am walking off the trail a little ways just to help get some distance between myself and my dog and those other dogs. So all of those things are going to help you to set things up to begin with. Remember that dogs don't have to play with other dogs. And again, my entire job right now is with the Dog Gurus is that we help daycare business owners understand how dogs play and understand how to manage off-leash dog play. So I totally believe in off-leash dog play, but there's only certain dogs that enjoy that kind of play. And I don't think off-leash dog play is critical to your dog having a really, really, really amazing life. So dogs don't have to play with other dogs. So all the stuff I'm talking about isn't necessarily like, this is how you're going to get your dog to love playing with other dogs. I'm just talking about keeping your dog safe when you're out for a walk and your dog is on leash, and they don't have to play with other dogs. The other thing to remember is when I talk about socialization, socialization doesn't just mean exposure. So just exposing your dog to things that it doesn't like isn't going to solve the problem. The socialization really has to be positive, helping the dog make a positive association with something that it doesn't like. So an example, if your dog really doesn't like other dogs, just taking him to a dog park and letting him play with other dogs is probably going to make him worse, not better. So you can't just expose the dog to something that he's afraid of or he doesn't like and expect him to get better. You have to figure out a behavior plan that exposes that dog in a way that the dog is having fun. The dog is learning to change its emotional state. So again, that's a totally separate session we could do at some point. But I just want to make sure that you understand, like, oh, we'll just throw them in the dog park and that'll make everything better is not going to be the solution. All right. Number 2 tip is what to do when you see a loose dog. So let's say you're out for a walk and hopefully you're paying a little bit attention to your surroundings, and we ideally want to see the dog, maybe not before your dog, but ideally before your dog. Dogs are really good, especially if they are a little bit nervous around other dogs. They go on high alert. So sometimes your dog will see the other dog before you do, but ideally you're scanning the horizon and kind of looking for those loose dogs as well. And the sooner you see it, the sooner you can help your dog respond to it as well. And the sooner you'll be prepared as well. So when you see a loose dog, the first actions are, number one, don't run. And if you're really nervous around other dogs, that is a very common reaction, is that you just want to turn around and hightail it and start running. But that's going to most likely make that dog want to chase you, especially if that dog does want to come and meet your dog or see you or sniff you or whatever. So you do want to stay calm. You don't want to run. If the dog's approaching within hearing distance, I would yell something at the dog. Usually I will yell sit or go home in kind of a threatening way, like not, we always say, don't use a lot of tone of voice when you're training your dog. In this situation, I would be using tone of voice. I would be yelling at the dog, sit or go home, to try to really deter that dog. And a lot of dogs, that alone will cause them to go, whoa, that person's not friendly. I guess I'm out of here. So those are your first two actions that you can take just to see if you can get the dog to leave you even before it catches up to you. And you might have to yell it a couple of times, but those are the first actions I would take. The second action, and this is something I would be working with your dog when you aren't around other dogs to begin with, and that's an emergency U-turn. An emergency U-turn is essentially, you're going to teach your dog that you can really quickly turn around and walk the other way. And you're going to do it the way you would do it if you saw a dog, which is, again, you don't want to run, but you want to turn around and maybe start retreating if that dog is far enough away. But your dog is not used to you being kind of nervous and panic stricken, which is why you want to practice the emergency U-turn. So we actually practice this in our reactive classes. We call them Rowdy Rover classes, where we would just have the owner walk and then we would yell something and they would have to immediately turn around. And you don't just want to yank your dog. You're actually turning and encouraging the dog to come with you. So you're like, oh, come on, we're going this way, really fast. But you get to the point where the dog realizes, oh, we're turning really fast and going the other way, not into a run, but fast enough that you can turn around, go in behind a car or go into a house or go wherever that might be safe for you to go. But you do want to practice it so that your dog learns that little bit of panic that you have, they kind of get used to that. Because otherwise you're going to turn around, your dog's going to be like, what in the world are we doing? And you don't want to be dragging them down the street. So that's the other thing that you can start to practice at home, even before you have dogs and in your area, and get your dog prepared for if they do see that other dog. But you have to remember those things you're going to do when the dog is still at a distance, not when they're like right up close to you. So again, really trying to pay attention to your surroundings. If you know there are certain areas where you're more likely to see loose dogs, then I would be going on alert in those areas and just keeping an eye out. And ideally watching your dog as well. Because like I said, a lot of dogs will notice it before you. And you might look down at your dog and see your dog is like its ears are perked up and it's staring at something. Look that way too and see what your dog's looking at. Because you want to use all these things initially when when that loose dog is still at a distance from you. So then what are some other options? And these are really a couple of different things you can try. I would pick one or two that feel the best for you or maybe suit your situation the best, because some of them have pros and cons. So we'll talk about all of these. Number one, this is one I use almost all the time when I see a loose dog, is I'll throw treats at my dog, at the dog that's oncoming. And I almost always have treats on me when I am walking my dog. I almost always have my treat bag with me because I just never know when I might feel like training my dog. So I don't give him treats all the time, but I almost always have my treat bag on me. So when I see a loose dog approaching, I will take a whole handful of treats. I mean, a whole handful, big, huge handful, not just like one, and I'll just throw them at the other dog. The idea is that hopefully that dog will stop long enough to eat all those treats. and gives me time to get away and get into, go into a car, go in between houses, go in between, buildings, go in between two cars, whatever I need, whatever I want to do. But the idea is I'm throwing enough treats that that dog, starts to sniff them treats and then starts eating them and then gives me time to get away. I often get people that say, oh, I don't want to throw treats because then they'll come back for more. Well, they might, but even if they do, like you could throw more treats, but even if they do, at least now I've made a good association between myself and that dog. So now he's like, oh, we're a treat. So I don't really have a problem with it. But in reality, anytime I've ever done this, I haven't actually seen that happen. Most of the time I'm away and usually the dog eats the treats and then he goes about his business and goes and does something else. So I don't really see that happening as much as people ask me about that. The second thing is using an umbrella. And using umbrella has a disadvantage because you can scare your own dog. But the idea with the umbrella is you get an umbrella, ideally one that is a power one. So you push a button and it opens and you hold it in front of you facing the oncoming dog, and you press it so that it opens into the face of the other dog. And for many, many dogs, that popping open of an umbrella will scare them off. So that oncoming dog is scared off and they go away. It also gives you a little bit of a barrier between you and your dog to kind of scare that dog away as well. The downside is if you're going to use that type of a tool, you want to make sure your dog is not freaked out when you open it. So you do need to practice that. The umbrella is opening out into the other dog, but just that popping out motion, the popping open motion could scare your dog. So you want to make sure that you practice that with your dog on leash to make sure he's not really, really nervous about that happening before you use that as a tool. And even better, if you are going to use an umbrella with a face like this one actually works even better. So, and I've seen them used really, really successfully, which, like I said, most dogs are not used to having an umbrella pop out in front of them. And that's usually enough to get them to back away and either leave or at least not come any closer. So I think those two tools are probably some of the best tools that you can really use when you're out for on a walk with your dog where you're likely to see loose dogs, because they work pretty well. I know a lot of people carry sticks or whatever. I'm not opposed to that. I just don't think that they're all that effective. I mean, again, if you're going to use something like a cane and I'm not talking about hitting the dog, I'm talking about to threaten the dog. You do have to be really threatening, and some dogs just don't care, but that is an option. I just think the umbrella is a little bit more effective because it does scare the dog. It startles most dogs because they're just not used to that kind of a thing. All right. And then tip number 3, if the dog actually does charge you, and whether it's friendly or not, these are the actions I would take, whether it's charging you and is going to jump up because it wants you to be petted, or it just wants to charge your dog and bark at them and more aggressively. There's a couple things I would look at doing. For small dogs, I would actually pick them up. And I'm going to tell you why that's a bad idea, but it is still what I would do. And for a large dog, I would drop the leash. So if you really think that that dog is going to hurt your dog or you're kind of at risk anyway, because you're probably not going anywhere. You're going to probably end up protecting the dog. So you are at risk of getting bitten. Small dogs are at risk. If it's a big dog, especially, small dogs are at huge risk of getting seriously injured or killed. And so that's why I would say small dogs, I would pick them up. If you pick a small dog up and that dog is approaching, they are probably going to jump up to get your dog, which means both of you are now at risk of getting bitten. But I would still think it's safer for you to pick your small dog up. In a perfect world, I would actually pick my small dog up and put them on something, put them on a trash can, put them on a car, like put them on something where, again, you're still going to be at risk of getting jumped on and possibly bitten if that dog is really aggressive. But we're trying to save your small dog from getting injured or killed. I would not even rule out putting them in a trash can. You know, if you're out on a walk and all the trash cans are out there, I would not even rule out putting them in that. Anything to protect them. The large dog, and this obviously is a safety factor, depending on where you're located. If I'm near a super busy street, I'm probably not going to do this. But if I'm like in my normal neighborhood, and a large dog is chasing or coming up to chase my dog or me, I'm probably going to drop the leash of my dog and let him run. And at the very least, it gives him a chance to not be stuck on the leash, getting attacked and not be able to do anything because of the leash. So again, those two options are not great options. Obviously, there's still a ton of risk for you and your dog, but those are two things that I would do if the dog is actually charging and you've tried those other things and they obviously aren't working. I would still be yelling at the dogs. I would still be trying to distract them with anything I had. I would still be trying to get away. But if they're actually at the point where they're charging you, then those two actions I would look at doing. Again, at that point, you are at risk of getting bitten. So, and it's really, really hard to stay calm through all of this if you're actually being chased and, attacked. But you just want to think through that. And I would be paying attention to where you are when loose dogs are most likely to come around you. Like, honestly, if I've told some of my clients before, if you're always walking in an area where there's loose dogs and those loose dogs are not friendly, I would go walk someplace else. Like, I literally wouldn't keep putting myself in that position because eventually that's not going to turn out well. If you're in an area where there's a lot of loose dogs, but they're mostly harmless, they're just people who don't pay attention to their dogs, or they get out of that's what happens in our neighborhood now is they get out of the gates just accidentally, or the wind blows the gates open, but the dogs aren't really aggressive. They're just wandering aimlessly and they're pretty friendly. Then I probably wouldn't reroute my walk, but I would be paying attention to, my surroundings at all time. If I'm walking where there's a lot of more aggressive dogs and it's near like a busy highway, I'm not going to walk there because one of my tools is to let my dog run so he can get away. And I'm not going to do that when he's by a really busy road. So you have to think through some of that and what kind of risk that you want to accept as well. Same thing with size of dogs. I've literally had clients where I'm like, with little dogs, especially, where I'm like, you just shouldn't walk your dog, or like drive someplace else and walk your dog, because little dogs are at the biggest risk of not just getting injured, but literally getting killed. If a big dog picks them up and shakes them, they can get internal injuries that can kill them. So I don't want to walk. If I have got a really small dog, I would not be walking my really small dog in an area where it's just known that there's a lot of off-leash dogs out and about. So those would be my recommendations for all of that. All right. So talking about what happens if there is an actual fight. So what do you do if the dogs are actually grabbing each other or they get into some kind of a fight situation? So number one, I would say, write this down. Don't grab the dogs. This is every single person's first inclination, is to grab the dogs. And it's just human nature. Human nature is that we grab the dogs to try to separate them. And that is, you're at risk of getting bitten if you do that. And I am going to talk about how to grab the dogs if you do have to do that. It's just shouldn't be your first option because you are at risk of getting bitten. So I would say instead, I would start with making a loud noise. And that's probably, if you're out on a walk, it's probably going to be you yelling. Although if you're in an area that is known for loose dogs being out and about, then I might actually carry a marine air horn. It's basically a small canister that are used for boating. And you could just hook it onto your belt or carry it in a bag over your shoulder or whatever, but it makes a super loud noise and is a potential deterrent for dogs. This is another thing you could actually use when dogs are approaching as well, in addition to the umbrella. So this is another option. The downside is, again, just like the umbrella, that air horn is going to sound loud to any dog, not just the one approaching, which means your dog, especially if you've got a dog that's more sound sensitive anyway, like some of the herding breeds, Shelties and Corgis, some of them are a little more sound sensitive anyway, that this air horn is going to scare both dogs. So that's why I don't really like it as a first tool when dogs are approaching, because you just don't want to be using it all the time if your dog is afraid of it as well. But if there's dogs in a fight, it is a good option. And the idea behind the air horn is you're trying to startle the dogs so that they separate. And that's the idea behind making any loud noise. So if you are in like a backyard, you could take, you know, if you had a stainless steel bowl, you could take that and clang it against something. But if you're on a walk, you're not going to have all of that with you. So it's usually going to be you yelling, or if you've got some kind of tool like this marine air horn, that's another way to make that loud noise. And again, trying to startle the dogs enough so that they separate and you can get your dog to safety. So that's the idea behind it. The other one, so make a loud noise is one thing if the dogs have actually started fighting. A second thing is to push something in between the dogs. Again, if you're on a walk, this is going to be harder because you're not going to have a lot of things with you. But if you are somewhere where, let's say you're on a walk and you're near those garbage cans, grabbing a garbage can and rolling it over to the dogs might startle them enough to separate them. If you happen to have some kind of a, you know, bowl or something that you're carrying in a bag, or if you're on a hike and you have a backpack, you can try to shove that in between them. The idea is, again, you're trying to startle them enough to get them to separate. But pushing something between them is a little bit harder because you might not have access to anything. Really, the only time I've seen this where you're on a walk would be if you've got a backpack or a bag or purse or something like that, that's big enough where you can really use it to push between the dogs. And then the third thing is you can try throwing something over the dogs. Typically, this is going to be a jacket. If you have a jacket on or something that you have over your shoulders that obviously wouldn't take your shirt off unless you're a guy, that might be good. But I don't know the rest of you, I would recommend taking your shirt off. But anything you can throw over their heads. And the idea here, again, is you're trying to startle the dogs. And usually if you throw something over them where they suddenly, their eyes are blocked and they can't see, a lot of dogs will separate at that point because they just don't know what's going on. So if you have a jacket, or, you know, if you're in your backyard and you've got a blanket or a bed or something like that, that might work. Otherwise, if you're on a walk, it's probably just going to be like a blanket. You can try throwing that over the dog. And obviously all of this stuff is going to be happening super quick. So when I say like, try these 3 things, that's going to take all of like 5 or 6 seconds. It's not like you're going to spend, you know, let me do this for 3 minutes. Oh, that didn't work. Let me try this for a minute or 2. You're going to be doing this all pretty quickly. And again, you're probably going to rule out some of these. Like if it's in the middle of summer, you might not have anything to throw over them. So that might not even be an option for you. And then the last thing that I would recommend, and this is something I would probably recommend getting if you are always walking where there's a lot of off-leash dogs, and it's a product called Spray Shield, and it's a citronella-based spray. It's sort of like, think about bear spray for dogs. So it's similar to that. It's a citronella-based spray that you can actually spray at the oncoming dog. This is another one that you could technically use when the dogs are approaching, like when you're using the umbrella. The downside, again, is the dog has to be close enough to you to have it work. And if there is a lot of wind, you're likely to have that spray come back onto you and onto your dog. It's not going to be as much as whatever you're spraying at that other dog approaching you, but it is possible that it'll just irritate your eyes and your dog's eyes. It isn't a comfortable feeling. So people often say, well, is this kind of mean to the other dog? And I would say, yes, in the same way that bear spray is not pleasant for a bear, but I still carry bear spray when I go hiking in Colorado. So it's a last resort effort. And I have seen this used. I was at a rescue adopt a dog event one time, and 2 dogs actually got into a fight. One was a rescue and one was a person that showed up with their dog, and those 2 dogs got in a fight. And the only thing that stopped those 2 dogs was Spray Shield, which we sprayed into both of the dogs' faces because they were fighting at that point. And they did separate. So Spray Shield, and again, it comes in a small little container that you can hook onto your belt or whatever. So that is another option. And you would spray it into either the oncoming dog, or if the dogs are fighting, I would spraying it into both dogs' faces. And it's going to irritate their eyes, irritate their nose, and hopefully startle them enough so that they separate and kind of tone down because of that stuff being sprayed in their face. Again, none of these are tools that I would use on a routine basis. These are really tools I would use when there is a fight and you have to separate that fight. So a lot of people ask me about water. So if you're, out for a walk and you have water bottle with you, or you've got, water that you're going to give your dog, and people say, well, I'll throw the water on the dog. What I've typically seen is that water doesn't work to break up a fight unless you have a really large volume of it. So if you've got a huge bottle of water, not just like a, cup like this, or like an 8 ounce or 16 ounce of water, a bottle of water is probably not going to be enough to stop a fight. If you have, a gallon or more, which you're probably not going to be hiking with that or walking with that. But if you have that much, it might work, where you can dump it on the 2 dogs that are fighting. Where I've usually seen it work is when it's like a water hose, and it's a large volume of water that causes the dog to separate. In that situation I just told you about, where I was at that rescue event, when those 2 dogs got into a fight, somebody actually did come up and pour a bottle of water on them. It made no impact whatsoever, because it was like 16 ounces of water. And most dogs are like, whatever, I'm just going to keep on fighting. So I don't typically recommend it. But if you have a huge, big canteen of water, you could try it. I wouldn't necessarily rule it out, but I would only use it if I had a really large volume of water. So if you have to separate them, so you've tried all those things, and it's going to feel like forever, although it's probably going to be like 15 seconds since all of that started. If none of that has helped, and you're still seeing that the dogs are fighting, they're not separating, they're not stopping, they're not, there's no way to get them apart, and you have to separate them by grabbing them, then I would try to grab one of the dogs by the hind legs. And you are at risk of getting bitten when you do this. But the idea is to grab one of the dogs by the hind legs. Usually it's going to be the bigger dog, and pick their hind quarters up, so that now they're off balance. So they're on their front 2 feet, at which point most dogs will let go of what they're biting in order to turn around to bite you. This is why it's a risk. It's less risky than grabbing them by the collar. If you grab them by the collar, a lot of dogs will turn around and just bite your arm. So it's a little bit harder for them to get to you when you're grabbing their hind legs, but they can still get to you. So the idea, if you grab their hind legs, is to grab their hind legs and then sort of pull them over and sort of toss them to the side, which is basically kind of like wheelbarrowing them, but you're not going to go very far. And most of the time, most dogs will let go because they're off balance. Now, it doesn't mean they won't just go grab on again. So you have to watch for that. But it is an option. If you have 2 people who happen to be there, then each of you could grab a dog. That's a little bit more likely. But again, once you let go, because you're going to have to let go pretty quick. You can't just hold on to them like that. Once you let go, they're either going to be disoriented and stop fighting, or they might just go back to fighting again. So you have to watch for that as well. So it's not a guarantee that you're going to separate them. And like I said, you are at risk of getting bitten when you do that. So you have to take that into consideration as well. All right. So I'm going to stop for a second and just look through the questions really quickly. I don't know if you saw any, Deborah, that I should answer right now.
Yeah, I'm glad you stopped, because there are a fair number. One that you just dealt with, one of the attendees said that she's heard that gel is more effective than spray for pepper spray. Is there a gel version of Spray Shield?
I have not seen a gel version. That doesn't mean there might not be one that exists. I have not seen it, though. I think the challenge would be with the gel is you would have to actually physically touch the dog to get it there too. So that would be my only other concern with using that. So I would look at that. And then I did see one person say, it's really frustrating when I pull my dog to the side into a sit position and another dog owner lets their dog approach. Oh my gosh, it's so true. It totally messes up the training session. I totally agree with that. And it's so weird to me that I just was training my, another dog, a friend of mine's dog. And we went 4 steps off the trail, got our dogs to sit. And then someone walked off the trail 4 steps over to us. It was like, hi, people are just really, they just don't get it sometimes. So I tend to be a little bit more vocal when people are doing that, like, oh, I'm training my dogs, or, you know, don't come over. And even then they still come over, but at least my dog is just trying to look at me in most of that.
You know, there are vests that say dog in training.
Yeah. And those are great as well.
Yeah.
It gets a vest on our website. Really there's words that say dog in training, stay back, or don't pet them, or whatever.
Yeah. Under books and products or something like that on our website, there's a link to a dog in training vest. And that, from what I hear, has been really helpful for people. Yeah. Then
I did see one where you're talking about leash reactive dogs. These techniques won't work if a dog approaches mine on leash and or a dog so close that mine is over threshold. Yeah, all of these things I would use with any dog, but kind of to go back to the very beginning where I said, here's things you need to do to begin with. Reactivity, leash reactivity is something that I would put in the category of training. So I would continue to get that training and sign up for a reactive dog class and learn all of those skills to make your dog less reactive to begin with. A reactive dog, so that is going to be a totally separate issue. But all the things I'm talking about, I would still do with a reactive dog because you're still going to have that same issue. The problem is that there's a whole lot of other training you can do to start to help your dog. Leash reactive dogs, there's a couple issues. One is that, you know, all the same things that happen with any loose dog, that can happen. A loose dog can approach you, but now the reactivity of that dog may cause the approach to be a whole lot worse, because now the dog that's approaching, even if that dog might have been friendly and he was like, I just want to come up and sniff your dog and sniff you, the reactivity of your dog may cause that dog to be like, what in the world? Like, what is wrong? And that dog then gets more nervous. That could cause that dog to go away, but he might just get more defensive himself. So all of that goes to training that has to be done separate. So we aren't going to talk about how to train leash reactivity, because that's a totally separate session. But all these things I would still do with those dogs. So hopefully that makes sense.
What if you can't drop the leash, either because of the circumstance where you are, or because your dog might then attack the other dog?
So and I'm going to talk a little bit about if your dog is off leash and gets loose or whatever, but then I would go back to trying to just keep backing up. If your dog is where you're in a situation where you can't drop the leash. So you're either by a busy highway and you don't want to drop the leash because it's not safe for that reason, or you're afraid that you'll drop the leash and then your dog will go after that other dog, then I would keep the leash on, but I would keep trying to back away from that other dog, do the tossing of the treats at the approaching dog to hopefully get him to buy you some time so you can get away, or use the umbrella to get that dog to back away from you. And then at the same time, I would still be trying to get your dog to focus on you and reward your dog for moving with you away from the other dog. So it's really becomes a combination of keeping that dog away and keeping your dog calm, which is obviously harder if your dog is either leash reactive or just hyper in general and, you know, crazy in that particular moment. So hopefully that makes sense.
That leads into another question. How do you stop your dog from wanting the treats when you throw it at the other dog, when you throw the treats at the other dog?
Oh, that's a really good question, actually. So if I'm tossing treats at another dog and my dog sees that I'm tossing them, I'm just going to quickly take another treat out and put it under my dog's nose. I mean, my dog is going to be like, oh, there's a whole bunch of treats way over there, or like right next to me, there's treats. So I want to redirect my dog to be like, okay, you get treats too, but don't go after those. And if that's really a big distraction for your dog, I would just work on that from home, you know, just go out on walks. It's really just teaching the leave it command. So I would just be working on leave it so that you can throw treats and then tell your dog leave it. And then your dog's like, okay, well, what do I get from you instead? But that is a really good question, because you don't want your dog to drag you over to the other dog. And then there's both trying to eat those treats. So that was really good.
And this question, if the approaching dog is aggressive, won't your dog stop taking treats and try to get away?
That's a good question. It depends on the dog. It depends on your dog. In general, if your dog is over threshold, which someone mentioned, or just totally distracted, they don't necessarily even need to be, they might be scared. So if that dog is truly approaching them in an aggressive way and they're scared, yeah, they're going to stop taking treats. And that's kind of why I talked about with that emergency U-turn, I would be practicing it to begin with so that your dog gets used to it out of context of all of that anxiety and stress and nervousness and everything. So yeah, but if they're trying to get away, that will help you, because if you're going to turn and go in opposite direction, your dog will most likely want to go that way too. The downside is they may actually be pulling you and you want to try not to run. So that might be the more likely scenario. So you might have to be holding them back a little bit, but yeah, you're probably not going to have a huge successful training session in that moment, because unless your dog is just like oblivious or he doesn't care that dog is approaching. My dog now, Ranger, he like is totally oblivious to dogs approaching us, whether they're friendly or not. So he just keeps taking treats, but he's like unusual in that way. I think if your dog is really afraid, they're going to stop taking treats, but you're still going to keep working with them to move them away. So hopefully that makes sense. That's a really good question too.
A lot of people commented on having leash laws, but there's still loose, hostile dogs that are in their neighborhoods. And they didn't have any idea what to do to get the leash laws enforced.
Yeah, that's a hard situation for a couple reasons. One, in that moment, I can tell you from what this has happened to me before, where my dog's encountered another dog and it didn't go well. I mean, my dog hasn't been injured before, but at various times and with my dogs, I've been in situations where they had an unpleasant encounter with another dog. And in that moment, like you lose all sense of what to do. Like, honestly. So usually I'm not polite. Like I would like to say that it happened. And then I'm like, oh, it's okay. Like, here's all the things you can do to help this not happen again. And let me have your phone number. Yeah. That's not how my brain works. I'm usually really angry in that moment, or I don't say anything. I'll just cause I don't want to blow up and start cussing. So I just don't say anything and I just leave. So first of all, you have to have the presence of mind to even figure out who that person is, where they live, what area, and you might know where they live just based on your neighborhood, but a lot of times you don't. You just encounter them, you see them that one time, or you see the loose dogs that one time, and you never know where the person lives. So it's hard to go back to animal control or whatever police department or whatever municipality manages your leash laws, and it's different in every state and city. It's hard to go and report the person because you generally have to know where the person lives in order for that to be followed up on. Otherwise, most departments will do is just generically remind the city, hey, we have these leash laws. So, and that, unless you really know where that person lives, there's not a lot you can do about it, unfortunately. And you can continue to bring it up at various, you can either call whoever is in charge of leash control in your area. You can continue to call them, but a lot of times that doesn't make a difference unless there's some type of a hearing where you can bring sort of a lot of people to that hearing and talk about what needs to change. But it does become a really hard issue to deal with, and which is why in most places that things don't change a lot. The only time they typically will change at all, and it's not citywide, it's usually if somebody gets seriously injured or killed, an animal or a person. And then that one dog usually gets taken away, or laws are put on that family to control that dog differently. But it is definitely hard to work on citywide if your city doesn't enforce it. So I wish I had a better solution for that, but I really don't.
I think
a lot of people are saying leash laws mean nothing. I mean, in Colorado is the same way. We have a lot of open spaces in Colorado, most of which have leash laws, but any open spaces, just forget it. Like, I'm like the only one with my dog on leash half the time in those places, which is why I don't go to them very much, because I don't like the risk. So.
I think maybe the last question for now has to do with walking past dogs behind electronic fences. This person mentioned that the batteries are dead or the person will cross anyway, would you just avoid those places on your walks?
Yeah, to be honest, so that's a really good question. If I am constantly walking my dog where there are dogs behind invisible fences, or this also happened to me in Virginia, just down the street from my house, there was a lady that had a dog, and she would always, in the summer, she always had her door open. And so she had a storm door, and her dog would slam against the storm door every single time we walk by. I stopped walking by that. So if you have a situation, whether it's an invisible fence or even a fence that you don't think is sturdy, or in my situation that I just described, it was the storm door, where day after day after day, or every single time you walk by that, the dogs are totally crazy. If the dogs are just sitting there watching me, I don't care. It's the dogs that are barking and running up and down the invisible fence, or that dog, like I talked about, you could hear the storm door being slammed into, you could see it as well. Those situations I would not keep walking by, because all of that. And if you have a dog that does this as well, if you have a dog that constantly races to the door and barks aggressively, not just a little, alert bark. I'm talking the dogs that are like, seriously, I want out of here to get to that animal or person or whatever is walking by my house. That tension builds up and arousal continues to grow, and practice makes perfect. So if that dog is doing it all the time and they finally do get out, all of that pent up aggression, energy, arousal, like whatever you want to call it, can cause that dog to go overboard when he does get loose. And so if that's a situation, I would probably not keep walking by that, because all you're doing is letting that dog continue to practice that behavior. And if it does happen that the batteries die or whatever, he just decides that day he's going to go through the fence. Or I was afraid with the dog that was behind the door that at some point he was going to crash through the door, or the door wouldn't be latched right. You're at the other end of that. That type of pent up energy is not good. Same thing if the dog's on leash and is tethered and is running against the chain every day, which we don't see as much, although there are still some rural areas where people tether their dog. Any of that repetitive type of behavior, I would not keep walking my dog by that, because I'd be afraid if the dog got loose, it was not going to end well. So that's a really good question. All right, let me move on, and then I will keep answering questions at the end. We have hopefully plenty of time to answer questions, but I just wanted to get caught up a little bit. All right. So the next thing is, if you've got those dogs that have been in a fight, they've actually, maybe even they don't even look like they made a lot of contact, but there was enough that, there was snarling and growling, and they might have made contact for 1 or 2 seconds, or maybe even 15 or 20 seconds, hopefully not that long. But the next thing you want to do, once they do separate, whether it's, you take your dog home, or someone comes and gets the other dog, whatever it is, when you have a time to do it, you want to immediately check for injuries. And the problem with dog fights is that punctures don't really bleed easily. So it is very possible that your dog gets bitten and you don't see it right away. And especially if your dog has a lot of fur. So if your dog has been in any kind of incident, and no matter how long it lasts, and where I see this happen most often is people are like, well, they got into a little tuffle, but it was only like 3 seconds and then it was fine. The dog went away and we just finished our walk. I would still keep checking your dog the rest of the day. And because it is possible for your dog to have gotten bitten and you didn't even notice it. And your dog might not have even reacted, just in all of the craziness going on. So if you have a long-haired dog, I would take a blow dryer just on low and blow dry against the hair. So the hair just blows, opposite of the way it's growing into the fur, into the skin, so that you can see punctures a little bit easier. But then also just look for blood, because obviously that's what's going to eventually let you know that there was an injury, is usually blood. It's just that if it's a single puncture wound, like from a canine tooth, they usually close up really quickly and you don't see the bleeding really fast. So definitely keep checking your dog. Obviously check to see if they're limping or showing any kind of pain. And then for small dogs, if your dog has been attacked by a larger dog, and again, even if you don't think anything happened, I would recommend taking the small dog in just to be checked by a veterinarian professional, just because they can get internal injuries that you don't recognize right away. And the dog might be acting perfectly fine, but have some type of an internal injury, maybe internal bleeding. And that's especially true if your dog got picked up. And if your dog actually got picked up by a bigger dog, hopefully it didn't get shaken, but that's possible. When a big dog picks up a little dog, sometimes they'll just shake their head. And they could even just do that one time, and the little dog, you know, gets back on the ground and you think, okay, everything's fine. I would just check your dog, have your dog checked by a vet, because those small dogs can get those, bigger dogs can get internal injuries as well. It's just not as likely big dog to big dog, because you're not going to really see a large dog pick up a big dog like that. You're not going to see like a lab pick up a German Shepherd or vice versa. It's more the big dogs to little dogs. So you definitely want to pay attention to that as well. And obviously, if there's a medical concern, you're going to take your dog to the vet and just make sure that everything's okay. So the last thing I'm going to talk about, and we're going to spend a little bit more time on this, is what I talked about at the very beginning. If you can learn canine body language, that is going to help you really be a better advocate for your dog. It's also going to probably help you look at that oncoming dog and make some decisions a little bit faster about, should I be afraid, or is this dog seem to be friendly? Like, can I just calm down? Sort of like my story in the beginning where all my friends were freaking out and I was like, that dog is fine. Like, he's not going to do anything when he gets to us. But all of that is because I understand how to read canine body language. So body language is on a continuum with dogs. And you can see here in the middle, and we use a traffic management signal, green, yellow, and red. So you can see in the middle is green. That's where the dog loves things. That's the dog that's happy, you know, relaxed. He's really not showing any kinds of stress. That's how you see your dog probably most of the time when your dog's hanging out with you in your house. Going from the center to either side, left or right, you're going to see the dog go into what we would call yellow body language. And I'm going to give some examples of these in a second. And then ultimately to red body language. And the interesting thing is, on the opposite ends of the spectrum are either really fearful dogs on one side or really confident dogs on the other side. So a lot of times we sort of assume that dogs that are barking or growling or lunging are aggressive. And most of the time, that's actually not true. Most of the time, those dogs are fearful, but the behavior that they're showing looks the same on either end of the spectrum. So what we focus on more in terms of reading your dog is not necessarily what are they saying. It's more of, is the body language green, yellow, or red? And the idea is, if it's red or yellow, we want to bring it back to the green as much as we can. It's just really understanding that dogs have that continuum and they can move through that continuum really, really fast. For those that have reactive dogs, you know how fast your dog can be, like hanging out to like full on alert, barking or whatever. And so they move through those behaviors really fast. Most people recognize green really easily, and most people recognize red really easily. So green is really that happy, relaxed, ready to play. You know, like I said, most of the time in your house, when you're hanging out with your dog, you're seeing green body language. And then hate it, that red body language, is also very easily identified. That's the one that people are like, holy crap, he's growling, barking, snarling, you know, he's about to bite me, whatever. Like, it's very obvious. The parts that aren't as obvious is the yellow. And that's where I would recommend really focusing on watching for signs of stress. And again, I'm going to give you some examples of these in a second, where the dogs are starting to get a little uncomfortable, but they're not like full blown freaking out yet. And if you can catch them in the yellow state, that's where you have the most success to get them to be calm again. Again, if you're watching an oncoming dog, like when I was giving you that story at the beginning, where that dog was approaching me and my friends, that dog was completely green body language. He was loose. He was relaxed. He was like bouncing his step. His tail was not high. He was not snarling. He was not growling. He was not showing any kinds of really red behavior, but he also wasn't showing any yellow behavior. He was just like, hey, I'm here. So, and which is what I was keying off of when I was just being calm and just waiting for him to approach and greet my dog and then go about his business. So it's really helpful to understand that. But most people don't really even pay attention to the yellow. They just kind of skip over it and they see green and red. So I want to help you understand what the yellow looks like. So again, green, curvy bodies, playful, loose postures, and typically an open mouth. If the dog is panting, that's usually, in context with its exercise, obviously. Unhappy dogs, the other end of the spectrum, more tense. So a lot of stiffening. They have a lot more straight edges to their body, if that makes sense. Typically a closed mouth. And if you look at the picture on the bottom of that little beagle, he also has a whites of the eye, which we're going to talk about. That's more of a yellow signal, but you can see how he's just stiff. Even in a picture, you can see he's sort of stiff and holding his head over that toy, which he's actually guarding. The other picture, the top picture, that I can't think of the name now. It's not Bernese. Saint Bernard. That Saint Bernard is very relaxed, like open mouth. His ears are kind of droopy, but look at the little dachshund underneath him. Very stiff, closed mouth, probably backing up to the bigger dog for a little bit of protection. But that little dachshund is not as happy as the other dog. So those are the signals you're going to start watching for. And then again, the middle area is that area of tolerance where it's really like those yellow body language signals. And I'm going to go through about 6 of these that are relatively easy to see, but that most people don't pay attention to. And what I want you to start doing after this session is start to watch these things in not just in your dog, but also in other dogs that you see. And you'll start to see some of these when dogs get a little bit nervous. And I will say, as we're thinking about these signals, these yellow signals, it doesn't necessarily mean the dog's about to bite. It doesn't necessarily mean the dog's about to growl or snarl or whatever, but it can lead to that. And it might be that the dog is just in a new situation and they're like, whoa, I'm not really sure what's going on here. And you just need to give them time to get back into the green body language. It might be that you might see this like when your dog first walks into a new environment. Maybe you take them to the vet's office, or even the very first time they go to a daycare or a dog park, you might see some of this. So it doesn't necessarily mean like, oh my gosh, the dog's about to attack somebody. It's just a signal to say the dog is not as comfortable as he was maybe a few minutes ago. So you want to start paying attention to some of these things. So closed mouth is one of the very first ones that I would tell people to look at. And closed mouth is in context to the environment. Normally your dog is going to be, let's say you take them for a walk or you take them any place. Most dogs, when you get them out of the house, they're going to be panting a little bit. And the closed mouth happens when they stop panting. And what happens is typically it's like the dog takes a breath and holds their breath. So it's as if you were walking and it's kind of that like, oh my gosh, what's going on? It's that sort of gasp of holding their breath for a second that dogs do as well. So if you see the picture with the little girl, that little girl loves her little dog. The dog is not thrilled about being held that way. And you look at his mouth and his mouth is closed, is kind of tense. That's just him. He's not about to bite the little girl, but he is saying, this is not great for me. Like I'd rather be down on all 4 with my 4 paws on the ground. In the little picture on the other side with the labs, those 3 dogs are obviously seeing the same thing. They're all looking at something and getting a picture taken. The 2 on the right, on the black one and the one next to it that are yawning, you're going to see is also a stress signal. They're a little bit nervous. They're starting to yawn. Like, I don't know what's going on here. The other one has his mouth closed, and you can see he's a little bit more wild-eyed, so to speak. So again, not about to bite anybody, but they're all just going, whoa, what is that in front of me? Most likely they're seeing the camera that the guy probably lowered to the ground to take the picture and just caused a little bit of stress because they probably aren't used to seeing that camera. But it's a good example of that open mouth versus closed mouth. So when I see a dog approaching me, that's one of the first things I look at is as he gets closer, does he stiffen and close his mouth and stand still? I'm going to be more worried about that dog than a dog who is panting, happily approaching me with a little bit looser gait. So you can look at that. Yawning is another stress signal that this is, again, outside of context of where the dog might have just woken up. I mean, your dog may wake up and yawn, or he may get ready to go to bed and yawn. But this is outside of that context where they yawn sort of out of context of anything involving sleep. You'll see it a lot of times if you're training your dog something new. And we see it a lot when we are teaching the stay command. So you tell your dog to stay, and then you'll back away and your dog will suddenly yawn. And in training classes, people will always go, oh my gosh, how could be tired in training class? And it's actually not that the dog's tired. They're just a little bit nervous. Like, where are you going? And why am I staying here? Again, not that it necessarily means you have to stop training because your dog's stressed out. But when you're looking at all these signals, you're looking at, are you seeing more of them? Are they all starting to compound? Do you see a dog yawning and then he also closes his mouth, lips his licks? Oh my gosh, I can't say that. Licks his lips, which is you're going to see is another stress signal. Are you starting to see all of these things happening on top of each other? That's when you start to go, oh, okay, we really need to maybe change the environment or help the dog or whatever. Lip licking is another stress signal that, again, most people ignore because they don't realize it means anything. And that is just where the dog flicks its tongue out of its mouth. Again, outside of context of food. Like if you just gave your dog some liver, he might do this because he just finished eating, or, give him peanut butter and he might have peanut butter stuck on his top of his mouth or on his nose or whatever. But this is outside of the context of having treats or giving food to your dog. So again, with these two pictures, the kids look lovely. They're having great fun with their dogs. The dog's not so thrilled. I can tell you that lab, this is my lab will do. And I would do some of this stuff with your dog and see what they do. Because my dog does get hugged by me all the time. He doesn't particularly like it, but he tolerates it from me. And that's just part of living with me, is you're going to occasionally get kissed and hugged if you're my dog, but I'm not going to let other people do that to my dog. And I don't do that to other people's dogs because they're going to be more tolerant of your family than they are necessarily of strangers. So if you look at the little girl who's hugging that lab, most likely the lip lick is probably because she's trying to pull that dog next to her around with her arm around his neck. If you probably take a picture of that same dog without touching him, he probably looks really, really relaxed. And then same thing with the little Jack Russell there in the other picture, because she's shoving his face next to hers. And you can tell the kids mean well. It's just that, and the dogs, again, they aren't about to bite their kids, but they aren't thrilled with it. So lip licking is one that's really easy to see, but generally gets ignored because we just don't realize it's a stress signal. The whites of the eye showing, that can also be something called whale eye, which is how some people refer to it. And if you see on these two dogs, it's the outer corner of their eye, you can see a little bit of white from the outside of their eye. Typically what's happening is the dog is stiffened and they don't want to move their head, which stiffening is a sign of nervousness as well. And they don't want to move their head. And that's why you start to see that white of the eye. So in both of these pictures, this little dog on the left side probably just doesn't like the kid that close to him being in his face. And his mouth is closed as well. Whites of his eyes are showing. So really that's something I would probably move my child if that was my child, or call the dog away, one or the other. And then in the other situation, the girl is going to pet the dog, and that dog with the little girl with the red, that dog looks like he's looking at something else. And I think it's something else that's causing him, number one, his tail's up, his mouth is closed. He almost looks like he's about to either growl or bark. I'm not sure it has anything to do with that girl. I think it has to do with something that's off camera. But you can look at that body language and start to see like that dog is not really comfortable in that situation. Just because of that, that's not a moment where I would want my child necessarily interacting with my dog if my dog seems nervous or stressed about that. But you're just looking at some of those stress signals to see, what do you see in the dog's behavior that we typically are more subtle, that we typically don't really pay attention to. So here's a good example of loving it or tolerating it, because that's really what we go from that green body language of loving it to tolerating it, which is more of that yellow. And this is the same family, same dog, same photo shoot. And you can see that picture on the left, that dog is not happy, mouth closed. Again, not about to bite. He just doesn't like being handled the way she's handling him. And this is not to say the family's mean or anything. This is like a typical family doing a photo shoot where they're trying to get their dog to sit and take a picture. But then you can see in the next picture where nobody's touching the dog, much happier, much more relaxed. He's like, oh, that's a great picture. They're doing the little rabbit ears over everybody. So this is how quick dogs can move from one to the other. And that's what you're trying to look at as dogs are approaching, and also look at your dog. When your dog's in any situation, I tell people, everything you do with your dog do it through the lens of, does your dog want to be doing that? This is when people say, like, what kind of training methods should I use? Like, I train with all positive reinforcement, but I will say, well, watch your dog. Your dog's going to tell you if what you're doing is really stressful to him or makes him happy or whatever. If you want to take your dog someplace, let's say you want to take them on a picnic, or you want to take them to, the county fair or whatever, because they let dogs there. What does your dog say about that? Like, if he's showing all these stress signals when you're in that environment, then probably you don't need to have him there. If you take your dog to the veterinarian or a groomer, two places that typically can be more stressful for dogs, there are things that those pet professionals can do to help your dog relax if they understand canine body language. So helping, you to look at that and say, like, wow, he's really nervous right now, so let's try to do this. When I take my dog, like, to the vet, I typically keep him on the floor, and I'll usually ask for the vet to examine him on the floor, which my vet will usually just get down on the floor with him, because he's a lot more comfortable on the floor than he is on the table. And his body language changes significantly when we put him on a table. He can still be examined on the table. He will not try to bite, but I don't like to see him all stressed out being he's on the table. So if they're willing to do all the exam on the floor, that's what I would ask for. And so looking at all of that really helps you to be a really good advocate for your dog as well, in addition to keeping them safe when you're out for a walk. All right. So we had a couple questions about this. So what if you are the one that has the loose dog that might be going after other dogs? So I'll go back to the thing I said in the very beginning, which is, number one, teach your dog to be polite on leash, and two, socialize your dog in a way that you can train them to be calm around other dogs. So even if your dog sees another dog, hopefully their inclination is not just, even if they're off leash, hopefully their inclination is not, oh, every single dog in the world I see, I have to play with. Like, I don't necessarily want my dog to think every dog is his playmate, even if he's really friendly with other dogs. So if even my dog in my backyard, we've worked on recalls because we have a fenced in backyard, and we're on a area where people walk their dogs all the time. So the neighbors next to me, they have 2 German Shepherds, and my dog is a lab. Our 3 dogs will play together. So we'll let them, we have a fence in between our yards, and we sometimes will open that fence and let the 3 dogs play. Their 2 dogs will charge the fence. Any dog that walks by will charge to the back of the fence and bark and bark and bark at them. My dog will run to the fence. And when we first built the fence, I just routinely called him to me anytime a dog would walk by. So I didn't let him outside unless I was out there with him. And his routine was, I would see a dog coming down, I would call my dog back to me. And I just did that over and over and over. Well, to this day, he's 5 now, or he's actually almost 6. To this day, he will now run to the fence, but he typically won't do it for every dog. And he typically won't bark or do anything when he gets there, because to him, dogs are not like big playmates. Dogs are like, oh, I can sniff you, but we don't necessarily play all the time. I do take him places where he can play with dogs, but he will also come back to me if I take him to those places, if I call him. So I just never let him get to that point where dogs mean more to him than people. And I guess that's really the bottom line is, if you're out and about with your dog, teach your dog to pay attention to you, so that if he does get off leash, he might want to go see a dog, but it's not like, oh my God, I have to get there no matter what. Obviously, if your dog is aggressive with other dogs, then I would be doing things to make sure that you can manage your dog on leash and that he doesn't get out. Like I had a shepherd in Virginia who was reactive, and everyone called her Scary Carrie. Her name was Carrie. I adopted her from one of my daycare clients, and I did a lot of work with her to get her to where she was more manageable on leash. But I also never let anyone else walk her. So even my husband could walk her, but my kids were not allowed to walk her. Pet sitters were not allowed to walk her. If we went out of town, nobody was allowed to walk her. I told them, walk her inside. We had extra latches put on the gate because occasionally our gate would blow open if a big wind hit it, or our kids, when they were little, would unintentionally leave the gate open because they're kids. So we started putting double latches on, and they were actually latches the kids couldn't get open. So basically the kids had to go through the house to get out of the backyard, which worked better for me because then I knew the gate wasn't going to be left open for my dog to get out later. So I did extra security measures that way. For a period of time, I walked her with two leashes, one attached to a harness and one attached to a collar for double safety. So if you've got a dog that you know might get loose and you know might scare other people or attack other dogs, then I would do all of those extra safety measures as well as working with them to train them during that time that you're training them, and where you don't necessarily feel like they're safe to be around because they might get loose and chase somebody or whatever. I would just do all those safety mechanisms as well. So hopefully that makes sense as well. And then again, as a minimum, you saw this in the beginning for dogs on leash, but this is the same with off leash. As a minimum, I would teach your dogs to look at you when he sees other dogs. And again, that default of it's not about the other dog. It's really like I should be paying attention to my owner or my pet parent is a better alternative for your dog, no matter what situation you're in. So hopefully that helps a little bit as well. So then these are other things I would consider: a front clip harness. If your dog really has issues with other dogs, I like the front clip harness because you have a little bit more control. Gentle leaders are not a problem either. I mean, I've used a lot of gentle leaders or head halters for dogs that really pull. I like the front clip harness as a safety mechanism because I do have control. But then, like I said, I usually would put a clip on the front clip harness and a clip on the harness, the actual collar. So there's two leashes on the dog as well. You could also just use one leash and clip it to both places, which is another alternative. I would also consider a muzzle that I think for dogs that, whether they're fearful or they're aggressive, dogs that are likely to respond with snapping or biting when they're around other dogs. If you want to be really safe, just teach your dog to wear a muzzle. I wouldn't just put a muzzle on your dog and walk them. I would work with your dog to get them used to a muzzle. And dogs can get acclimated to muzzles and not be stressed out by them at all. And that's also a safety mechanism if you have issues, you know, whenever you take your dog someplace, even at the vets, if you think your dog is really, really overly nervous at the vet, that's an option to make your dog feel more comfortable and make you more comfortable. And the thing about the muzzle is you can teach your dog to enjoy it and not at all worry about wearing it. I mean, if you've ever seen greyhounds who have been acclimated to muzzles because they wear muzzles when they're doing racing. So if it's a track dog, those dogs wear muzzles and they could care less. So don't feel like, oh, my dog will hate the muzzle. You can totally work with your dog to teach them to be comfortable with a muzzle on. But what the muzzle does also is it changes your behavior. So you're going to be a lot more calm when you're working with your dog if the dog is comfortable wearing a muzzle as well, which makes the learning environment better for both you and the dog. And then again, not every dog wants to say hi. Even the friendly dogs, even a really friendly dog might not really want your dog to, you know, charge up to it. So you have to take that into consideration as well. So never let your fear decide your future. I always like to talk about that just because this can be a really scary situation for people, whether you're on either end of that situation. Your dog got out, you know, that's horrifying to know that your dog might scare or go after someone else's dog. And obviously, if you're the one who has your dog on leash and other dogs are approaching, that can be scary as well. But there's a lot you can do to help to overcome some of that fear and work with your dog to make that a better situation. So just a few examples. I did have a couple of people that had emailed me after I've given this presentation before. And Sarah said, I use treats or go home and it works great. I'm in Portugal for vacation and almost every dog is off leash. So that's one of those situations. She didn't have her dog there, but she was using it because all these street dogs were approaching her and it was working really well. So this was Dave. I was walking a dog and a large shepherd mix came barreling down its driveway barking. I yelled, no, go home in an authoritative voice. And it did just that. And I think we kind of forget about yelling. I think, like I said, that's one of the very first things I would do. Most of the dogs that you're going to see are family dogs that may or may not have training, but most of them are family dogs. And most of them generally understand that tone of voice where you're angry, yelling at them. But you have to train yourself to do that because the instant reaction when you get approached is to do some of those stress signals we talked about with the dogs, is kind of hold your breath and be nervous and not say anything. So, but it does work for a lot of times if you will yell at the dog. And then Elizabeth said, thanks, it gives me more confidence in dealing with strange dogs. So All right. So kind of wrapping up, and then we're going to answer some questions. I talked about in the beginning why you might be here. You're scared of dogs, or maybe you've been attacked before and never want to be in that situation again. Maybe you live in an area where there's just a ton of loose dogs and you want to know how to be safe, or you just love dogs and you want to help others understand them, which for some people is a reason that they like to learn some of this stuff. So I would just say, what's next? Well, you have two options. One is keep walking your dog and hoping for the best. I don't really like that option. The other option is to continue to learn about canine body language and all the actions that you can take to keep your dog safe, which is, I venture to say, most of the folks that are on here want to do that, is just learning more about your dogs, and not just to help them on a walk, but really just to be a dog advocate. So I talked really briefly at the beginning about Ruffly Speaking, which is our pet parent membership site, simple tools to help you and things that you can share with others. So it's one of the easiest ways to make canine body language simple to understand. And we do have a whole membership site if you're interested in learning more about just having a really strong bond with your pet. We have a whole library of pet parent resources. We have educational content that we upload every month to a private area for our members. We have a helpful community of like-minded pet parents, encouragement and feedback for any of your dog issues through a private Facebook group. And then we also have insider pet products that we know work because we have tested them and seen them work in daycares and boarding facilities around the country. And then a direct line to myself, as well as Susan Briggs, who is the other co-founder of both Ruffly Speaking and the Dog Gurus. So if you're interested in that, there's a fast action bonus. If you sign up during the webinar that's being live right now, you'll also get a 30-minute audio program about keeping your dog safe in dog parks. So we talk about that as well. So if you're interested in that, the website is rufflyspeakingdog.com. It's $19.99 a month. It's a membership. You can cancel anytime, or $199 a year. We save 2 months if you do it that way. So I'll just quickly put the website up there. So rufflyspeakingdog.com is the website where you can sign up for that. But I did talk about giving out that checklist, and I am going to applaud those of you that have been staying on all this time, and we'll go to answer questions after this, but I will give that checklist to Deborah and she can send it out on how to handle loose dogs and dog fights. So I appreciate everybody hanging around for so long, and I will answer any questions that you have now. And I haven't looked at the chat, but I know there were some coming in, Deborah, so I don't know if you want to answer.
Yeah, I've got a few. One was, what can I do to help my dog when we come across an unexpectedly aggressive dog behind a fence?
So, yeah. So if you do walk your dog and there's another dog behind a fence, I would actually, number one, go to the opposite side of the road. And I would be doing basically behavior modification, where I'm trying to make a positive association with dogs barking to something good for my dog. And this is a whole similar to reactive dog training. So it's kind of I'm going to give you a really short answer to something that actually will take a little bit longer. But the way that I do it is I typically take a lot of really high value treats. So I'll take chicken or cheese or liver or steak, something really, really good that my dog doesn't get very often normally. And when I get to that situation where the dog is behind a fence really barking and my dog might be nervous about that, I'll move as far away as I can. And then I will try to get my dog's attention and just walk past that house while feeding my dog. And basically, I'm just going to feed him nonstop as I walk past that house. If he's too afraid to even eat, then what I might do is not go past the house. I might just back up. I need to back up to where my dog will at least take treats from me. And that might be that it's one house away before you even get to that house. And I'll just work there. But I want the dog to start to say, okay, I'm okay going by this house. And actually I get treats as I'm walking by this house. When my current puppy, because I had a reactive dog before I got my current puppy, and by the time I got Ranger, my dog now, my other dog, Carrie, had passed away. But because I had that reactive dog, when Ranger was a puppy, every single time he heard a dog bark, he got a treat. I just built into him right from the start. He didn't have to do anything. It's just, if I heard a dog bark, he would get a treat. To this day, if he hears a dog bark, he comes running over to me, because I went overboard conditioning him that dogs barking was a good thing, because I just didn't want him to ever become reactive. So that's basically what you're doing, except when you're doing it with a dog that already has an association that's not so good, you have to do a lot more work to make that, to balance that out. So hopefully that makes sense. And then, like I said, if I wouldn't necessarily keep walking by that fence if that dog is out there all the time. If it's just like a one time, you know, you have to walk by him because that's just how it is that day, then I would just try to reward your dog and make a positive experience out of it.
Someone else asked, in general, for dogs that are very fearful of other dogs, whether you have any specific advice. She said that her dog just has to see a dog approaching on leash, off leash, whatever, and freaks out and wants to go home.
Yeah. So if your dog is really, really nervous around other dogs, then I would really work with a trainer that can set up, and I probably would just not take my dog for a lot of walks right now. But I would find other ways to give him exercise, whether it's in my backyard or in my house or whatever. But what I would do is I would be trying to change that association to dogs are horrible to, well, dogs are okay. Not that he necessarily needs to play with them, but that you can get to where you can walk by the street, walk by him on a street. The problem is that takes a lot of setups. So you either have to have some willing friends that will be like, I would be telling my friend, hey, go sit at the park, you know, or some controlled space, maybe just it's in your front yard, whatever, and just hang out with your dog. And meanwhile, I'm going to just walk my dog, you know, up and down like 50 yards away, however far away that it's going to take your dog to actually succeed in this. This is where having a trainer would help, because the trainer can help you set those scenarios up where you go to a safe place and you practice with your dog where they can succeed in not freaking out when they see another dog. And you have to figure out what distance you have to start at. And for some dogs, it might be 20 feet away. And for some dogs, it might be 50 feet away or more. And you can't help that dog unless you can start to set that scenario up and practice and practice and practice to where the dog can start to make some other association. And then you start to decrease the distance. And again, the goal might never, ever be to be nose to nose. I want the goal to be, you know, if I'm 5, 10, 15 feet away or on the other side of the street, my dog has gotten enough positive association that they can keep walking by without completely having a meltdown or being so scared they can't function. But that takes a lot of practice and a lot of repetition, which means you either have a lot of friends that can help you, or I would go find a private trainer that can work with you to set up those scenarios to help you, because that's going to help the dog as well.
Okay. Someone wrote about pepper spray. She's heard about dogs who don't find citronella very scent aversive. Is there some reason not to use pepper spray? That's going to be the same case with pepper spray. I mean, with citronella or pepper spray. I don't really like to use pepper spray, but there are some bears that don't care about bear spray too. There's no way you're really going to know unless you try it. So there's not a reason that is a downside that you could use it and maybe it doesn't work, but it's still something I would try to use. And then there are two owners. One has a Rottweiler, one has a pit. And their fear is if they drop the leash and there is a fight, that their dog will be the one blamed because of their breed.
I think there's probably some truth in that, depending on your dog's breed. Unfortunately, some people do view them differently. I think if there's a fight where there's an injury to the other dog, then whatever dog isn't bitten is the biter, whether it's a pit bull, Chihuahua, Lab, German Shepherd, whatever. I guess in that situation, what I would be really looking at would be, would your dog hurt another dog in that situation? Because if they do get into a fight and you've dropped your leash, unless somebody's there seeing it happen, it is going to be hearsay. Like, well, this is what happened, and I dropped my leash, so that wouldn't. But if you're going to drop your leash, just like that other person asked a question a while ago, if you're going to drop your leash and you actually think your dog will hurt the other dog, then I probably wouldn't do it. But there's still a risk of the dog getting injured anyway, because that dog's going to come up close enough to yours. So I wouldn't necessarily, I would rule it more off of what how I think my dog was going to behave, more than just basing it off of the breed, if that makes sense.
I'm not sure. We haven't answered all of the questions. If you have a question and we totally missed it, you've got 2 minutes to send it in. Meanwhile, everybody, I will be sending the checklist along with the video link and the follow-up email. And we're going to leave the chat up for a few minutes too, so you can either copy and paste the whole chat or copy and paste the links or ideas that you want to. Okay.
I did see Patty's thing. Sometimes I drop treats over the fences where the dogs are barking. Over time, they'll stop barking. I actually love that, Patty. There is a risk that I would probably let the owners know I'm doing that, but there is a risk that you're giving the dog something that might be allergic to. But the idea there is really positive association. Like if your dog, that dog figures out every time. This is the same thing with postal delivery people who carry treats and just give treats to dogs, or like my UPS guy will bring my dog treats. He's asked me about it and I say it's fine. But you're just making a positive association. So that dog starts to go like, oh, every time this person comes. It's same thing in the shelter, where if you want dogs to not be barking at everybody that walks by the shelter enclosures, you just teach your staff to drop a treat every time they walk by. And after a while, the dogs are like, this is awesome. So I think that's a great idea, Patty. But I did, yeah. And then Terry said, you don't know if the dogs are allergic. So yeah, I would probably let the owners know, but
she does.
Yeah, it's a good idea.
Give her credit for that. She does talk to the owner to find out if there's any problem.
I think it's awesome. That's awesome. Mm-hmm. And then Deborah, you did put the link in there for the I Need Space vest, which is good too. I'm just trying to catch up on
this. Interesting. Oh, this must be like a typo. Okay. Yeah, there's a discussion about putting your dog in a sit when another dog is approaching, but I'm not sure that anyone suggested that you do that.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of honestly, I'm not a big fan of making my dog do obedience in a stressful situation like that, where now if on a walk, when I'm hiking, and I did give this example, when I'm hiking and everybody's dogs are on leash and let's say I'm going up the hill, up the path, and somebody's coming down the path, I will walk off the path and ask my dog to sit when the other dogs are coming down the path. So I do that. I do, because I do think that's teaching good obedience. But if I were to do that, I would not do that if the dog coming the other way was off leash. I would probably still step off the path, but then I would go into some of those other methods where I'm yelling at that dog to go home or throwing treats at them or whatever. I'm not actually going to try to make my dog sit when another dog is approaching him in that situation. So it's kind of the difference between like the Canine Good Citizen test, where you want your dog to be able to walk up to another person, have your dog sit while you shake hands with that person when that person has another dog who's also well-mannered. Like that's one thing. But if it's a dog that's off leash and I'm not sure what that dog's reaction is going to be when it gets to me or to my dog, I'm not really going to make my dog sit in that situation. I just think that's kind of mean, frankly, to be honest.
Yeah, it'll increase your dog's stress.
Right.
Someone else has a German Shepherd born in 2020. So 2 years old, let's say. And she wants to play, but is protective of her. So she can't let her play. And she just wants to know if that's okay. I assume she means play with other dogs.
Yeah, that's what I'm assuming. I think that's totally fine. I think it's totally fine for your dog never to play with another dog ever in his life. I really do. And I mean, again, I make my living helping dog daycares operate safely and manage dogs safely. But I also think that, and I've talked about this before, I think the majority of dogs truly don't want to be in off-leash play. I think probably, and this is completely unscientific, but based on all the dogs I've seen come through daycares, be evaluated for daycares, not just my own, but the hundreds of facilities we worked with, I think the majority of dogs, I would say like 60% of dogs, maybe even more, don't want to be in off-leash play. They would prefer maybe to play with one dog, maybe two. I just don't think that tons of dogs want to play with other dogs. And even those dogs that really do love to play, typically by the time they're about 5 or 6, that desire to play goes away as well. So, you don't see a lot of daycares with 7, 8, 9-year-old dogs in them. That just like you don't see a whole ton of adults going down the slide at your local playground. It's a young dog versus old dog kind of thing. So I think it's perfectly fine. I think dogs need energy outlets. I think they need environmental enrichment. I think they need mental enrichment and physical enrichment, but I think they can get all of that without ever playing with a single dog in their life. So I really don't think it's a problem at all.
There is like a half question here. I'm writing to try to get more information. All I'm reading is, or would I be rewarding the dog's barking? But I don't see the first part of that. Do you, Robin?
No, but I'm assuming that I'm assuming like I get this question a lot in the relation to if your dog's barking and like at a window and then you reward your dog to basically what I'm trying to have you do. Anytime your dog is barking at something, and I would recommend rewarding it for something in that situation, what I'm trying to do is change the situation in the dog's mind, change the the emotional state of the dog from I need to bark because this thing's here or walking by my house or walking by the front yard or whatever to, hey, I don't really need to bark because I get treats and that dog's going to leave anyway. Similar to the shelter scenario I just gave, like a lot of questions I get if I recommend that to a shelter is, well, if all the dogs are barking and all the people are walking by, are you rewarding the barking? To some extent, yes. But at the same time that you're rewarding the barking, you're also changing the emotional state of the dog. And so that's going to generally take priority, is that emotional state of the dog is going to change from I have to bark because I'm afraid of these people, or they're going to let me out, or they're going to, do something. Most of the time the dog's afraid of something when they're barking at like somebody outside, to I don't really have to bark. And not only do I not have to bark, but it's better if I do something else. So initially, you're just going to reward anything. It doesn't matter that the dog is barking. But as that emotional state starts to change, then you're going to add some other behavior into it. So you're not just going to necessarily always reward the barking, because you're right. If you just keep doing that, you're just going to cause the dog to bark more. But as soon as you start to see that emotional state change, what'll happen, like in a shelter environment, is you'll start to see the dog sort of look like, oh, wait, she's coming. Wait, I think I'm going to get a treat. At that point, you can actually ask them to sit, or just wait until they sit before you reward them. Same thing with dogs in the neighbor, or barking at your front door or at your house, or barking at people that walk by or whatever. Initially, you're just trying to change their state to like distract them so they don't think they have to bark. And then once they start to get to understand that, usually what happens is they start looking out the door and then looking at you like, wait, there's somebody out there. I think you might be giving me a treat. And at that point, you can start to ask them to do something else, whether it's come away from the window or go. I taught my shepherd to just go down the basement when people would walk by the house or knock on the door. So you could add some other element or some other cue to that. So hopefully that makes sense. I have a feeling that's probably what they were talking about, because I get that.
Lisa had a good idea about what it could be. I think maybe it's about throwing the treats over the fence. Does that encourage more barking?
Yeah, and that it could be that. Yeah, and that's another time where I think the change in the emotional state is what you're going to see happen with those dogs. So the barking, the type of barking, even if they do keep barking, is going to change. And then you'll start to see more of like them going, wait, this person's coming. And they sort of forget to bark, because the barking was not just barking for the sake of barking. It was usually barking because they were nervous or upset. So although that's where you think, well, if I just constantly do that, they're going to keep barking. Eventually what's going to happen is they're going to be doing something else as you toss that treat over. So hopefully that makes sense.
It makes sense to me. I think we have covered all the questions. If
Awesome.
not, you've got Robin's email. If you look on the current screen, and don't forget to check out rufflyspeakingdog.com. And thank you all for coming. Thank you, Robin, for giving this talk again. I loved it.
Yeah, thanks for being here. I appreciate you inviting me.
Well, yeah, I told you I heard it once and wanted to hear it again. And I'll leave chat up for just a few minutes for those of you who want to copy anything in there. And you will get the checklist probably in about 2 days, maybe even tomorrow. We'll see. Have a good Mother's Day out there, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Everybody.